Thanks for clicking on this video. I'm just going to get right into it. What is infantilization in the context of autism and neurodivergence? Essentially, it's treating an adult like they're a child, to put it simply. And this can be overtly or in subtle ways. And if you read the literature on autism and pay attention to who is this literature supposed to be read by? What's the intention of the writer in terms of their audience? And a lot of the time, you'll notice the intention is to parents about regulating their children, or to therapists in relation to children. So when someone who's autistic and is an adult is looking for information on what it means to be autistic, how to accept it, anything related to the topic, they're likely to be flooded with information that's not very relevant to them because it's written to parents as if there aren't autistic adults in the world. And I'm not saying that this is for every situation. There certainly are exceptions to this. However, I think it's important to notice the pervasiveness of this. And how does this make an autistic adult or someone with ADHD or some specific profile of autism like pathological demand avoidance feel when they're reading content that's supposed to be for helping them, as if they can't help themselves, as if they have to be regulated by some neurotypical, as if there has to be a mediation between the autistic mind or the neurodivergent mind by someone who's normal or neurotypical. It takes away feelings of autonomy and turns them into feeling like you need reassurance all the time from someone who knows better than you know yourself. Someone who knows you better. And it can make you feel ashamed. Make you feel like you're not an adult when you're like 30 years old or something. Maybe even older. And this is a large part of the reason why lots of people who are adults might not be willing to accept that they're neurodivergent when they actually are. Because they don't want to be talked to like they're a child. They don't want to be disrespected for sharing things about their mind and about how they react to things differently than what's considered normal. And to me, it's been very challenging. And I'm sure it has been for anyone who can relate to this. Because as a human being, as someone who is trying to understand themselves, you don't want to feel like you're being talked down to, like you're inferior, like you're not worthy or capable of understanding yourself in the first place because you have a disability. And I'd like to offer an alternative to that, which is that certainly you can understand, regardless of the discourse that's pervasive and overwhelmingly infantilizing to a large extent. We have a choice at some point in our journey when we realize that we don't have to internalize this narrative that we are regulated from the outside as autistics or neurodivergents. we have the power to make our own choices and explain our experiences from our perspective without delegating it to some neurotypical authority. And it's important to realize that, because a lot of the shame in spinning in one's head might come from the fact that we don't trust ourselves. And that's why I emphasize that trusting yourself, and what I've realized, trusting myself, opens up so many opportunities for growth that aren't available unless you have that trust. And it's one of the reasons I've decided to go to school to become a therapist, because I think doing that is helpful for my journey of developing self-trust and self-respect. And by this, I don't necessarily mean that you don't ask someone for help, that you don't seek advice or opinions or have other people listen to you that aren't autistic or neurodivergent. I don't think that this means you exclude people who are different. They might not understand things the same way, but it includes sharing with others, and it's perfectly okay to ask people for support. But being able to trust yourself in a way that allows you to ask for help and not feel like a burden. Giving yourself permission to not have to hold up the neurotypical standards that cause us to burn out and lose our autonomy and feel inadequate, like we're always trying to imitate something we're not. There's no need for that when you realize that you can find a way of living in a lifestyle, in a way of looking at yourself that doesn't constantly rely on some comparison of normal to who you actually are. And I know how difficult it is to feel like you don't have a choice but to mask all the time, that you can't say no because it might reveal that you're not normal if you were to do something different or not participate. And sometimes people might not understand. I mean, you can't control other people's responses. You can try and communicate to others and share your experiences, and some will listen. But that change comes from their own understanding where they're at, not from where you're at. But being someone who can learn to communicate in a way that brings people together, even though we have differences as autistic people. We have things that we know others won't understand because it's different. And to a large extent, our culture intentionally alienates us from the conversation because we don't check the boxes that they like, that they prefer. And giving ourselves permission to let go of those expectations and build community that's accepting of our differences, and finding those people who respect you for being autistic and don't treat you like a child. That's powerful. Because having a PDA profile or having ADHD or any type of profile of autism doesn't make you a child or more childish. And people who believe that really have some ingrained ableism to their worldview, that they have the right to treat you like a child because you're autistic. If you're 18, 25, 40, 80 years old, and people are still unwilling to look at you as their equals, then you can be honest about that and go like, this is not my burden. This isn't my responsibility to hold on to people who constantly infantilize you. It's not your responsibility. Once you realize it's not your responsibility, that's when it is not your responsibility. But when you're clinging to a neurotypical outlook, trying to imitate, feeling like you have to, you feel like it is your responsibility to mask that you're autistic, to apologize for being the way you are, feel like something that you live with is a burden to others. Even the idea of autism being something you live with might be problematic to someone's worldview. As if it's a noisy roommate and not really a part of you. It's still alienating in the basic ways at times in the language we use. It's alienating this part of ourselves that people don't tend to like a lot of the time, and creating a separate essence, the part of us that's universal, human, some sort of universality claimed to, that's somehow separate from this difference, this disability, disorder. As if they're roommates that don't get along. I'm living with it. And honestly, I'm not going to think of it that way. I don't want to. As if the autism is in the next room. That's a big reason, implicitly, why someone might infantilize an autistic person. That they see it as something that with enough punishment or enough regulating, enough education, that the autism will disappear from them. Or they'll look at it from a biological perspective. If we were to just have a cure to fix someone's body, that it's purely physical, that they won't be autistic anymore. We'll separate the imperfection from the pure essence of human. And I don't buy it for a second, that kind of stuff. Because to a large extent, the things that autistic people experience and the things that are disabling for us and the things that are symptoms that people don't think are disordered, becomes that way because of our relationship to our society. Because people don't like us the way we are. And then we're brought into a position where we don't like ourselves. We fear ourselves. We don't trust ourselves. And that is a huge reason for the suffering that neurodivergents go through. It's not just because of something in our minds or our own bodies. It's about our relationships to people who don't like us, and others who don't really care, and some who really like us. And you don't have to agree with me, but I hope this was an interesting discussion, and that you could take something away from this that makes you contemplate what autism means to you. And please subscribe and be pretty cool.